morning, welcome back. This is Daybreak on Citizen Television. Thank you for staying with us. What you heard was just a recap of the major news stories which happened as of yesterday here on the broadcast, and we welcome your contributions here this morning. The hashtag on Twitter is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422. At Citizen TV Kenya, at Ayub Abdikadir, and at Safin_Acheng. In studio, we are joined by Dr. Kenneth Omboge, who is a senior lecturer and the head of the Department of History at the University of Nairobi. Daktari, good morning.
Morning.
Thank you for your time. Martin Olo is political commentator and also a lecturer at Daystar University, and here to give us his account of what's developing in the country. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for your time. Also, shortly we'll be joined by the former Runyenjes Member of Parliament, Njaru Gathangu, who was among the people who went to the streets seeking the repeal of Section 2A of the Constitution in 1991 to open up Kenya as a multi-party democracy, as we take account of what's set to happen tomorrow on Thursday.
Yeah, indeed. We are turning 60, but have we lived up to that as a country? Have we lived up to the dreams and aspirations of our founding fathers? We'll be taking a scorecard of that in this particular broadcast, and even expectations ahead of the Madaraka Day celebrations that take place tomorrow. And of course, just to kickstart this conversation, let me begin with you, Dr. Omboge, on this. This is going to be the very first Madaraka Day celebrations under the presidency of William Ruto. Let's look at the political significance of this opportunity for him. What do you foresee? How should he take advantage of this platform tomorrow? First as a politician, and then as, let me say, a symbol of national unity as a head of state, considering the fact that it's a national celebration.
Thank you, Savine. I think for President Ruto, this is an opportunity that he has, because for the last getting to 8 months now, he has had a test of what it is to be at the top or at the helm of the Kenyan presidency. And it appears to me that if you look at these 8 months cumulatively, you realize that the country is probably more divided than it has ever been. The country also seems to oscillate between this more optimism and pessimism. So tomorrow, President Ruto has a chance to first and foremost give hope to a country that seems to be increasingly giving up. Number two, he has a chance to tell the country what is it he has learned from the sacrifices that our forebears made to make us a free country that we are today. President Ruto, compared to the other presidents that we have had, is actually the youngest. And number two, he was born in Kenya's post-colony. So in a sense, he has no baggage of our history, which is quite interesting. We are a country that has a very interesting history characterized by violence, characterized by discrimination, characterized by alienation, oppression, domination, and control. As a man who was born, in post-colonial Kenya, we are looking up to him to give us something new, to give us a new deal, to give us something that we couldn't see from the Kenyatta administration, the Kibaki administration, the Moi administration, and the Kenyatta One administration, which you could easily say that they had the baggage of the end of the colonial period. President Kenyatta was born in 1960, just a couple of years before the country gained independence. And he bears his name, actually speaks about the euphoria of the period. So he cannot run away from that. But then President Ruto actually belongs to this generation. Okay. So tomorrow it will be a chance to tell us what difference will he make compared to the various administrations that we have
had before.
Right. Dr. Martin, given that we are 60 years, that is more than half a century, we'll talk about the policy pronouncements at independence on where we are, an audit of the account therein between. But it appears that some of the problems that we outlined as an embryonic nation at the time still seem to be the problem that continuously dotted the past administrations and also the present one. I mean, what do you think might have led to the inability to address the very problems that we identified as a country and which presently, 60 years after we gained independence, appear to be still the thorn in the flesh of the government?
Let me start by saying that there have been some good things that we have experienced in the past, and we have had challenges, and we also still face uncertainty in the future. When you say that, yes, we have some policies, it's true that when you look at Sessional Paper number 10 of 1965, when you look at the Economic Recovery Strategy paper, when you look at Vision 2030, there have been very good documents that we've developed for ourselves that would guide where we are going. And for a long time, you saw that the policies that we set at independence kept on coming back as a way of informing our development plans and so on. And that's a good thing, because a country ought to anchor itself on a certain track, a certain vision, and certain policy direction. So to that extent, we have been okay. The challenge is that we have also not committed ourselves to our statements and to our policies by putting resources where our functions are. So you have a very good Sessional Paper number 10, and then you're talking about poverty eradication, then you're talking about ignorance, and you're talking about diseases. Unfortunately, 60 years later, we haven't made progress worth recording, because we haven't put resources, for example, on eliminating poverty. The nearest we've come to is to create a poverty eradication commission. And I keep thinking that I have never seen anybody whose poverty was ever eradicated because there was a poverty eradication commission, from when it was set up and when it went off. So you'll see that poverty is not something you eradicate because of a commission. It's because of the overall programs that a government then sets out to run and to deliver. We haven't done enough to fight poverty. If you compare us with other countries that were young as we were, then you could see how they are focused on what their issues were, and they have dented poverty, so to speak. Looking at countries like India, looking at countries like Singapore and others, they have focused and they are doing something about it. We are still talking about food insecurity today, several years down the line. Not because we don't have land, but we say we have drought, that should not be a problem. There are countries, including in the Middle East and Israel, that are so dry, they are so hopeless, but they produce food and they feed their countries and they export food. So we have no excuses. We just need to put our resources where our interests are. Unfortunately, we do not have enough good interest around food security, around health, around poverty eradication. But we are big on politics.
Okay.
Yeah, but Dr. Mbogi, he has said that is the problem lack of resources, really? Because over the years, we've had every regime that comes, actually, if you look at their manifesto, they're all centered around these three problems that we've been suffering from way back when our founding fathers were actually advocating for eradication of poverty, disease, and ignorance. Every person who comes, it's just a twist of language, but it's the same thing we are trying to address over the years. Is it lack of goodwill? Is it lack of the right people in charge? Or is it lack of resources? Where do you find the gap?
Well, I think it's a long story. But to sum it up, our greatest challenge has actually been leadership. Kenya does not lack resources. You have a very entrepreneurial population, very hardworking, diligent people by all standards. In fact, if you visit every African country, every other country in the world where you have Kenyans, we are known to be very hardworking people. The challenge that we have had is lack of leadership that has foresight and the interest of our common good at heart. And by leadership, I do not necessarily just mean the presidency, although that is really where the buck stops. But the general Kenyan leadership has been one that is bedeviled by the dialectics of ethnicity and identity, as it were. It's a leadership that is always bedeviled by issues that touch on corruption and self-aggrandizement, as it were. Is a leadership that always thinks about its survival and perpetuation as the situation unfolds in the country. That is why you see that in our politics, in our economics, even in our society, we have always been too close to the abyss. But thanks to the resilience of the Kenyan people, we spring back. In countries that have made a difference, it's actually leadership that stood out. The classic example that one could think of is Lee Kuan Yew, the founder of modern Singapore. Mahathir Mohamad, the founder of Malaysia. Singapore has no natural resources. It's basically an island. The only thing Singapore is known for probably is mangrove swamps and mangrove trees and all that. But from the very, very beginning, when they separated from the Federation of Malay, Lee Kuan Yew knew where he wanted to take his country. He was very clear. He made sacrifices. And by the time he left the scene, he was not the richest Singaporean that you had around. The reverse is different in our country. That some of our political leaders are actually some of the richest men and women that we have had in a country that is basically, as JM captured it in the 70s, as a country of 10 millionaires in a perilous sea of poverty-stricken peasants. So for me, it just all boils down to poor leadership.
Okay, when you mentioned leadership, Daktari, and the story of Lee Kuan Yew and how he lifted Singapore to its current state, given that there clearly is a dichotomy between what they had as a leadership and what we had owing to the same age group as a country and the progress they have made in terms of economic and social progress, then is our political establishment more or less interpreting positions of power and authority as an enterprise rather than a service delivery avenue to uplift the lives of Kenyans to the height of prosperity?
Well, you can put it that way, but our problem has firm historical roots. Goes back to the transition that we always label independence, which essentially, and I've argued this elsewhere, even in writing, that it was not independence as we always look at it. But fundamentally, it was a transition of power from one group of elite to another group of elite whose differences were actually skin color. One group was white, another group was black. So do
you mean the status quo prevailed?
Essentially, yes. Despite the euphoria that we call independence, the Kenyan situation has predominantly remained the same. You inherit a colonial system where the elites who control the state are the ones who matter. The instruments of governance and security and all that, they actually serve these elites. In colonial Kenya, the political elites who led the country were basically what we loosely call the gatekeepers between London and Nairobi. In the transition to independence, the political elites who took power were actually gatekeepers between, quote unquote, the Metraba and Nairobi on one hand, and then of course Nairobi and the countryside. And everything revolves around basically serving these elites. Our institutions, talk of the judiciary, talk of the security agencies. And their work is to make sure that the state is safe. Not Kenneth Mbongi serving Abdul Kadri and my brother here is safe. The state is safe. Okay. So actually that is where the problem is. The kind of leadership that we need is one that will need to dismantle that, unbundle that, and create a system where the political leadership holds power in trust of the citizenry. So that the predominant interests are the interests
of the people.
Of the people.
Who are the sovereign holders of power.
That's it.
Okay.
I think that there's an interplay there, and I wanted to buttress what he's saying.
As we proceed, Dr. let's just have an introduction of the former Runyenjes Member of Parliament, Njeru Gathangu. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for your time. And he expressly was happy about this Madaraka Day, surely, because he said it will happen in his home county. We'll hear more from him.
That's right.
Yeah.
Dr. Yes.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Mutumishi, it's called Mutumishi. What I was going to support what my colleague is saying is this. That is true. When you look at our independence and you look at the constitution that we negotiated in Lancaster, when the British allowed us to be independent, and I'm using that word very cautiously, they gave us a constitution that was different from how they ruled us. So they gave us a parliamentary constitution. Now, the first president was supposed to be the prime minister. As soon as we got that parliamentary constitution, the first amendments that we began to make on that constitution was to turn it into something else other than a parliamentary system. And that's where the term of imperial presidency comes in. We began, our elites who took power began to want to look like the queen. And they wanted to use a structure that was more of the king, queen, and the crown, and therefore taking power more and more to themselves as opposed to the people. So when my brother here says that we need to transition, we have tried to transition with our 2010 constitution. When you look at our 2010 constitution, it's very transformative. The unfortunate thing is that we haven't transitioned in our thinking and in our political thought process. So that today, most of our politicians have a problem with the current constitution because it is rather too advanced for them. They are clawing back and wanting to have things that are behind. So if you look at a number of legislation that we've had in this country over the years since 2010, a lot of them are contradicting the constitution, and every time the courts are invited, they are struck out. Today, when you look at a finance bill, as it's proposed, a number of items in there contradict the constitution. In other words, we haven't matured our culture into that of constitutionalism, so that whatever we want to do is rule of law. For now, is rule by law. So that even some of the arguments you are hearing about the retirement of the President Uhuru and so on, you can't have a law that takes away the liberty of a person just because they have served as a president. So to the extent that you are telling the president to retire from politics by law, you are actually denying him his constitutional right by the constitution. So that law is unconstitutional. So you can see our mindset and our thought process and what we do contradict what we aspire for, even as we have a progressive constitution. So it goes back to what we are saying. Of course, he's talking about leadership. I would say, what is our culture? It is us as a people who have not taken power or who have decided to release power to people who are not helping our cause. And so, in the process, the leaders we have reflect the people that we have. So when you are taking a bribe to elect a leader, when you are deciding not to go and vote, you are allowing those who are bribing to have their way. What are you doing? You are acceding to our situation. And lastly, when he's giving hope in terms of what the President Ruto is likely to do tomorrow, absolutely no hope from where I sit. He's either going to be disruptive because he's going to tell you about dynasties and how he wants to turn things upside down. Mm-hmm. But he's not going to tell us how that is going to give us progress over the next 20 or 30 years. Because at least Vision 2030 told us where we're going. The economic strategy paper gave us where we are going. Sessional paper number 10 gave us where we're going. I'm waiting to see what blueprint or what vision this regime is taking us or is implementing. And remember, I tie this regime back to the Jubilee regime. Because President Ruto hasn't just come from blues, he was there. The only thing that we've seen over the last 10 years is we ignored Vision 2030. We ignored anything that we had ever done, and we just started, flying without any rudder.
Thank you, Dr. for that. And just to bring you in, I know you have something to add, but just allow me also to weigh in on this. We started, by just painting a picture of where we are as a country and whether we have matured in terms of the different facets of the society, politics being key among them. And I'm concerned with some of the issues that both Dr. have raised, Yes. Especially with regards to, we seem to be celebrating independence, but to them, they say there's sort of like there was that deliberate move to go back to how we used to be even before independence. Sort of like independence is a fallacy. It's sort of like we still have the same problems that we used to have even when we are under the colonial rule. What do you think, though, from where you sit? Do you think we are celebrating something that is not there?
First of all, I'm happy because I got Daktari talking about the historical perspective of this nation. And as a historian, he will confirm this, that Jomo Kenyatta is the mess in this country. Jomo Kenyatta is the foundation upon which the British continues to rule this nation. And they prepared him specially so that he could come and become president of the Republic in their behalf at Mararar. And they took almost 1 year coaching him about how to govern this nation and how to accommodate them and how maybe the future should be like. Each of the presidents that has ruled this nation has got something to do with Jomo Kenyatta, And so when you are looking at Moi, he was brought in by Kenyatta, and after Murumbi, he was the automatic person who took over. And they went now to start preparing for the next, because Kenyatta was going. And one of the things they tried to do, was to see how Moi would be popular in this country by trying to introduce the Change the Constitution movement in 1976. And that was a Kenyatta and Jojo ploy to see how popular the man was. And when they saw that people were resistant, to what the Gikuyu barons were doing, then they stopped the campaign. And Moi became the automatic person to take over. When Moi took over, then the next thing was this. And there are some things that people don't know that happened. That because when Jomo Kenyatta was preparing to go, the next thing he did was to call Moi. And I'm saying this loudly so that the elders of this country may hear and know that he called Moi, and with Koinange and Jonjos and what have you, Kenyatta took a gourd of milk, like the one that is used in Kalenjin land, where you would have the mulsik, and Kenyatta gives Moi and says, look, I've taken my bit. Ile imebaki ni yako. But ukimaliza kama utamaliza ama ukimaliza tafadhali, bring it back to us. And that is what happened.
So in other words, as you proceed, this was a statement that rather reflected on the sharing of the resources, the sharing of the country, and amongst the political elite then.
Correct, but then more than that what Kenyatta and Moi are saying here is let it not go outside us. Let us be the people to run the show. And you can see the struggle that Moi had to bring Uhuru at the center, you know. And, Mama Ngina is still alive, and I'm very happy, and God bless her, you know, because Moi wanted Muhoho to be the person. And Mama Ngina said, no, that is my jewel, you know. Go and rehabilitate this man. That is the man that should be president. You know, and Moi went out looking for Uhuru, and Uhuru, wherever he is, knows that is the truth. He went looking for Uhuru, and he brought him here. He tried to get him a parliamentary seat in Gatondo. It was not possible. He nominated him. I was in parliament with him at that time, and Uhuru was a timid little man who did not know. He was lost, but they made him. He became president. You know, and you know how he did it.
All right, so he was his protege.
And what is the next thing? When Ruto is talking about dynasty, that is a bad statement for him to use. He is a Moi creation, you know. There are things that Moi would not have done that he did for him, you know. So when we are talking about dynasties in this country, we have only one dynasty. That is the Kenyatta dynasty that is running back where Ruto is. And Ruto has got the next problem. And who is going to be the next?
Okay.
That is the problem that he has. Now, before maybe you ask the question, I want to say this. For them to be able to succeed, they have kept Kenya ignorant. In fact, so deeply ignorant that Kenyans today, most of them do not even know the history of this nation. If you go to the education system, and Daktari is here, you will actually see the struggle in class, where the children or the students here almost know nothing about their country. They can only talk about pop stars and football and maybe Kipchoge running all over the place. But you go to the ends of academics, hawajui.
But is that deliberate, or is it
deliberate?
Is it
deliberate? How else would it be?
Who stopped
How else would it be? We have had more than 5 curriculums in this country.
All right.
Right? And those 5 curriculums, none of them you would say agrees with the other.
You had something?
Briefly, or just hang that thought. Yes. When we get back from the break, we proceed. And because we want to engage the viewers as well who are watching this broadcast, the hashtag on Twitter is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. We are talking about a day before the actual day in the county of Embu, where President William Ruto will be presiding over Madaraka Day celebrations. And it will be happening in the county of Embu, where the head of state will be marking the first in his tenure as the President of the Republic. We welcome your contributions later. We'll sample them here on the broadcast. Stay tuned. We are back after the break.